Okay, take 3 for social democracies. My videos get get interrupted by the weirdest things. Of course, kids making noise. Yes. There's not too much you can do about that. But my last one was interrupted. I was almost done too. And I don't really know how to edit yet. So I do these in one take. We've got 2 dogs. And one of them is a little silky terrier. And when he wants to come in a room, he stands outside of it with his nose under the door, sniffing really, really loudly. And it's cute unless you're trying to do one of these videos. So, having said that, social democracies, first thing I want you to know is that they are a creation, in a sense, a reaction to, or an alternative to, classic liberal political economic systems. It's a different philosophy. The second thing you need to know is that difference can be summarized by that whole freedom versus equality thing. And whereas classic liberals are maximizing freedom, not worrying so much about equality, social democrats are trying to find a balance between the two. Why a balance? Because they believe in a private market. They agree with classical liberals that there's something good about a private market. It creates wealth, it creates growth, and that it's generally more efficient for private markets to operate than it is for governments. But they also recognize the inequality that comes with free markets, and so viewing inequality as a bad thing that must be addressed, they do so. So what they're trying to do is maximize equality without tanking the economy. That's essentially what you're seeing everywhere. Social democracies, we saw classic liberal examples as the United States, the UK, social democracies, Sweden, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, etc. A lot of Western European countries, some others here and there. But you can see that in their policies. Well, what does that mean? Well, they have more regulation than you'll see in places like the US and the UK. They'll have higher taxes. Those taxes are used to create systems intended to reduce inequality, anti-poverty systems, healthcare systems, for example. And they have more public goods. So they also will have some, this is an important distinction, they will have some state ownership of certain industries. So certain industries are owned by the state. It might be, a lot of those things wind up being things like utilities. So the electric company, whatever, it might be owned by the state, or cell phone companies might be owned by the state, gas companies, water, things like that. Those are often owned by the state, owned and operated by the state. And then sometimes it might be really large things, like airline industries. Why? Because it takes a lot of capital to start that sort of thing and to run it and to be competitive. So you'll see in some social democracies there'll be partial or even complete ownership of maybe an airline's or the entire airline industry, oil and gas. There's a lot of state ownership of those natural resources. So that's a huge difference. Historically, there's a man named Bernstein, and the book mentions in the 1800s. We'll see this especially with chapter 9 on communism, communist and post-communist states. But the socialist movement was a reaction against the new industrialized world. Okay, the industrial era, in which people had been dislocated from agrarian communities, farms, etc., into cities to work in factories, and the factories and the cities themselves at that point were hellholes. They were absolutely horrific. So it was a massive adjustment, societal adjustment, that caused a lot of problems. It also did a lot of good. But some people were focused on those problems, the horrors of living in a city with no sewage, crowded streets, crowded housing, no working rights whatsoever. So working 16 hours a day, 7-year-old children working in factories, etc. Socialism and then communism were a reaction against this. Bernstein didn't accept how far the socialists and the communists wanted to take things. He didn't want to get rid of capitalism altogether. He wanted to soften it around the edges. And so social democracy really stems. He's one of the thinkers that inspired social democracies to try to find that balance. So we'll look a little bit more at this in a final snippet, but that's the basics of social democracies. And next up, we're going to be looking at communism.